on the website and some of the concepts that we've sort of been throwing around so that everybody is sort of on the same page as we start our conversations tonight.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you all for coming out tonight to continue this conversation, especially on our rainy, wet, cold night, so we appreciate that. We're going to do a brief PowerPoint presentation because some of you have come to some previous meetings, so you have some kind of a knowledge base. Some of you haven't, so we wanted to kind of briefly go over some of the information so that everyone here would be somewhat on the same page. And for those of you who've seen some of this before, I apologize. I don't mean to bore you, but I think it's important. But we have added some information as we've looked at the survey results and gotten some more information, so there will be some new material to go over. So we're going to do a brief PowerPoint, and then the board's going to open the floor to public comments, and we're going to just ask for people's suggestions, comments, ideas for as long as they want to do that, I guess. And then finally, hopefully you've all received a couple of dots. If you haven't, there's a box over there. And what we're going to ask you to do is a concluding activity so that everyone has a chance to provide some input without necessarily everyone speaking and being here till the wee hours. There's chart paper around the auditorium, and each sheet has roughly the 7 proposals or ideas that we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. And what we're going to ask you to do on your way out is you each have 2 votes, you have 2 dots, and go around the room and place a dot on the sheet for the ones that, the 2 that you like the most or can tolerate or however you want to describe that. But we're just trying to get a sense of the feeling of the group here tonight. And then on each side, there's also a sheet that just says other comments and suggestions. So if someone has something that hasn't come up, but maybe you don't want to talk about it in public or whatever, there's a chance for you to write something as well. So that's how we're going to approach the evening, and I guess we're off. So, you may be aware the board commissioned a facility survey in the spring to look at some issues that were concerning to the board. The first one is we have an overcrowding situation at the Hussey School. Anyone who resides in Berwick is probably fairly aware of that. While at the same time, we have an underuse or underutilization of some of our other buildings, particularly the high school. We also have 2 buildings, the Hurd School and the Lebanon Elementary School, that are approaching 60 years in age, which was a concern. And we know that this is going to be a very tough budget. So the board was trying to look creatively, look outside the box, and just trying to figure out how we might restructure things to address some of those issues and to be as efficient as we could be. One of the things that they did is we have enrollment projections each year. So some of you have seen some of these. But if you haven't, this is the projections going out 10 years for the district as a whole. We're slated to go up 8%, or about 240 students. But if we look at it on a town-by-town basis, the projections for Lebanon are to lose about 24 students over the course of the next decade, which is essentially flat. The projection for North Berwick is about a 50 student loss, which is about 7%. But the issue that is driving some of this conversation, only the town of Berwick is slated to have a growth in enrollment, and that's on the order of 300 students, or 24%. So that is why the Hussey School is getting crowded, and the board is looking at solutions to that. So some of the conclusions that we drew from the survey and from the enrollment projections, on the first slide of the district enrollment, the high school over the next 10 years is only slated to increase by about 60 students. So we stay right around the high 900s to about 1,000. And the high school has a capacity close to 1,500. So it looks like space will continue to be available at the high school for the foreseeable future. Berwick's going to continue to be the fastest growing town in our district, the only growing town in our district. And the Hussey School will continue to get more and more crowded. And with Lebanon staying essentially flat, there would be adequate space in the town of Lebanon if we continue to use the Lebanon Elementary School. This is just a table of the current building capacity for each of the schools and our current enrollment. As you can see, we have the capacity about 500 students, additional students at the high school. The middle school is 70 to 80 students under capacity. It's really the schools in Berwick, both Knowlton and Hussey, that are getting crunched. There continues to be capacity in Lebanon and North Berwick. And if you looked at the enrollment projections, it would appear that we continue to have space in those towns in the coming decade. So, the board's looked at various scenarios, and we're going to talk through just a few of them. And at the end, I'll have the results of the online survey that we did, so you'll have a sense of what people in the community are feeling. One plan, we called it the grade shifting plan, was to move the 8th grade up to the high school where there's space, move the 6th grade to the middle school, to have Berwick and North Berwick's 4th and 5th grade attend the Knowlton School, and to close the Hurt School. And we've heard from a lot of people that's not wildly exciting, so I don't know how much time we're going to spend on this, but that was one of the plans that was out there. If we were to do that based on current enrollment, you can see how the population shifts. But even with an additional grade at the high school, it still stays well under the capacity for the foreseeable future. And you can see how it affects the other schools as well. Okay, one of the other options was to do that shift but to leave the Hurt School open. It would solve the crowding conditions at the Hussey School as the Hussey 4th grade goes up to Knowlton. It does address the underutilization at the high school. It keeps the Hurt School open, which means we don't necessarily save any dollars, but I know that's a popular option in the town of North Berwick at least. Really the only drawback is that if we use Knowlton just for the 4th and 5th grade from the town of Berwick, it underutilizes the building. It'd be about half full. But on the other hand, the way Berwick is growing, maybe that's a good thing. So that's a second option. The third option, we called it the building shift plan. It was move the 6th and 10th grade to the high school and then have an upper school at the middle school. This was kind of universally disliked by students, parents, and practically the entire planet. So we're not going to spend a long time on it, but it actually has some merit, but we won't even go there today. Anyway, survey said no, people weren't real excited about this one, but it is up there just for you to look at. So, and that is the enrollment if we were to go along or implement that plan. And if we are to close the building, we have to do a calculation and what the savings might be, and it actually has to get approved by the Commissioner of Education in the state of Maine, and actually has to go out for a vote in the town that it affects. These were the savings that we came up with for the potential closing of the Herd School. And those are the steps that we would need to take. The board would have to decide to do that. The commissioner would have to certify the costs, and it would be a referendum question for the voters in North Berwick to decide if they want to keep it open at the town's expense or not. Then we got into some that actually came up from some of our survey results. So a fourth option is simply to move Hussey's 4th grade to the Knowlton School. We can find 5 classrooms there, which is the current enrollment in Berwick's 4th grade. And if we did a split schedule, which we've done in the past, it would ease the traffic flow in terms of parents dropping and picking up their children, since it'd be spread over an hour. If we had the 4th and 5th grade do a different time than the 6th grade. And one of the issues we have at the Hussey School, besides the crowding in the building, is the traffic and parking situation. So this would help alleviate some of the traffic flow as well. And this is just a potential floor plan just to show that the fourth grade would fit in there. It would be tight, but some of the spaces that we talk about where it says Ms. Easley and Mr. Fleming's down there, that's used as a single classroom now, but when the building was designed as a junior high, it was a double classroom space. It was originally designed as the home economics space, and it was designed for two teaching stations. There's a science lab classroom combination as well that we use now as a single classroom. Both of those classrooms have a movable wall, so it would be fairly, not too difficult to create additional classroom space there. And then from the survey, we've had suggestions to move different combinations of grades to the high school, practically from kindergarten on up through 6th grade, and I actually see half of the 6th grade staff here, so I'm sure one of the more popular options was to move the 6th grade there. So I'm sure they might want to weigh in on that. And that would allow us to move the 4th grade to Knowlton, either as a combination of North Burke and Burke, or simply just the Burke 4th and 5th grade. And again, that would somewhat underutilize the building, but certainly is an option. The only thing this doesn't do, where we have a one-grade school now, essentially, where all our 6th graders come together for 1 year, it creates a lot of transitions for our kids, and this wouldn't alleviate that, because again, we'd have a situation where they're in a building for a year, and then they'd leave, someday they'd come back. So, one of the other popular options was to move the kindergarten, and the board actually had some conversation about that. It really creates some neat opportunities for cross-age mentoring and all those sorts of things. The downside is you're talking real little kids on fairly long bus rides, and it would require some extensive renovation to some of the high school facilities because they're just not designed for really teeny kids. So, but that has come up as well. One of the more interesting ideas, which came from our community, was to balance the elementary enrollments if we start ignoring town lines. We have a long tradition and history here of our elementary populations going to school in their town. There's no requirement of that if anyone is familiar with Massabesic. Both kids from Limerick and Newfield go to the line school, so you can go across town lines. So we decided to look into that a little bit, and I'm not suggesting this as a solution, but if we ignored the town lines and basically went with a radius from each of the schools, you could do something along the lines of having kids who reside in Berwick but are on Little River Road, kind of along Long Swamp, and on the Berwick side of Diamond Hill, all go to North Berwick. Right now they go to the Hussey School. And if you did something along the lines of kids who live in the Key Road area and on Long Swamp from Alley Pond Road on up towards the Lebanon line, go to Lebanon. If we did that right now with the current population that we have, it would reduce the Hussey School population by 87 students. It would add 54 to Lebanon and 33 to North Berwick. That would show you the change in building enrollment from where we are right now. It gets the Hussey School basically under capacity. Hanson and the primary school continue to be under capacity. It affects class size, so what this chart shows is if we simply move those kids out of Hussey to the other two towns without adjusting the staff, you'd wind up with the class sizes in black. But given the fact that you've taken close to 90 students out of the Hussey School, if you removed a teacher in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade and sent them to the other two towns, you wind up with the class sizes in blue, which are much more equitable, and there would be space in Lebanon and North Berwick for those staff. So I don't quite know who suggested it, but thank you, because that's actually a pretty decent solution. If anyone wants to take credit, go right ahead. And one of the other things that has come up is, why don't we just build additions to the Hussey or the primary school? Both schools were designed for additions. However, it's not simply the case of adding classrooms. If anyone knows the Hussey School, it's kind of based as a U, and you could close off the end and almost make it like an oval. So that is certainly doable, but one of the issues in any building is when you add classrooms or students, then you're also talking about the core facilities. And one of the issues we have at the Hussey School is, like, the cafeteria is not really, really big. The school was built and designed 20 years ago when we didn't have all-day kindergarten. We had half-day kindergarten, so there was probably about a third of the population when the building was originally designed. We weren't planning on them eating lunch because they went home at midday. So even if you added classroom space, you'd also have to do something along the lines of increasing cafeterias from the other core spaces. And the main DOE is not likely to support building if you have capacity in other schools. And right now there's a moratorium on state construction funding anyway. And this is actually directly from the state application for construction. And as you can see, one of the requirements is you must include a study of the availability and accessibility of space in other facilities, both those within the administrative unit and in adjacent units, because the state doesn't want to spend money unnecessarily either. So one of the requirements they would first ask before they even entertain the thought of building is, do you have space in other buildings, and how are you adjusting to use that space? And that's really the conversation we're having right now. That's what the facility showed. We've got crowding in some places, but we have undercapacity in others. So any construction in the near future would be totally local tax dollars. You really couldn't expect any state support. So we've done an online survey. I trust some of you have participated. Did not check it today, but as of late Sunday night, we had 159 responses. Probably the most popular option was something that moved the 6th grade to the middle school and the 8th grade to the high school, whether or not the Hurd School was kept open or closed. But that actually seemed to have some interest on the part of the community. As I said before, the move the 6th to 10th grade to the high school was universally disliked by practically everybody. So I don't think we'll be going there. And other suggestions, as I said, were moving the 6th grade up to the high school, moving the kindergarten, building additions, making the middle school a 6th, 7th, and 8th building, which would be a good solution, although we just don't have the capacity in that building to do that, and basically redistricting across town lines. So those are roughly the 7 options that we've gone over briefly. And starting over there is number 1, and then we go 2, 3, other comments, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to turn the mic back over to our board chair, and the board will entertain comments and suggestions for as long as I think they wish, and then we're going to encourage you to basically vote for the top 2 choices that are up here around the room, and the board will take all that into consideration, and we'll go from there. So thank you very much.
We'll start. Go right ahead. If you can tell us your name. Thank you.
The Hurd School? The Hurd School was built in 1948. What we call the New Wing was built in the 50s. Well, change is hard here. We're maniacs. The building is in decent shape. I mean, it is showing its age, but we've done renovations. We've got a new boiler. We've got a new HVAC system. We've done asbestos abatement. It's not the world's most handicap accessible of buildings, but it's in decent shape. There certainly are schools in this state in much, much worse condition than it is that aren't getting state funding either. So we're not in a situation where we absolutely have to close it right now, but it is 60-something years old and is showing its age.
Yes.
My name is Jenica Osborne. I teach here at the high school, and I have children in the district. If we shut down the Hurd School, I have questions about how many classes would be per grade level in, let's say, the 4th grade. That's just one thing that I always am curious about.
Okay, right now there are 3.5 teachers in the 4th grade at the Hurd School, and there are roughly 2.5 5th grade teachers. The 4th grade is probably the largest class in Northbrook right now. So we have one teacher who does a 4th, 5th combination to kind of even it out. But historically, Northbrook has had about 3 classrooms per grade level. And that's what would probably move someplace else.
In Berwick, so combining them, a 4th grade class would be 8 classes or 9 classes?
Depending on the grade, at the Hussey School, we have 6 teachers in most grades and 5 in a few others. So depending on the class, you're talking 8 or 9 divisions if we combine the 2 towns.
So that's a big school.
Yes.
My name is Deb Randall, and I have 2 kids in the system and 1 on her way in North Berwick. And I'm wondering, all the stats look like the Knowlton School was already maxed or over, and we're planning on moving more students into the Knowlton School by closing the Hurd. As you just said, the 4th and 5th are more students than what's in Knowlton now, so I'm wondering how you're going to do that other than splitting rooms in half that you were talking about.
Okay, we use the facility capacity that came out of the study, and one of the conversations we had, because we didn't agree 100% with what the architect necessarily had to say, because I'm older than dirt, I've been here forever, and I can remember when we built the school, and we built it for 500, and I actually have a facility survey that we did some years ago that said the building was 500. So depending on which number you use, it's either okay or it's a little crunched. I'm not going to say there's a ton of room there, but it is conceivable to do that.
Yes.
The middle school students up to here, so the 6th grade would be here, and then, well, 8th grade. But how would we do sports for the middle school?
Well, they'd still do middle school sports, and we could either bust them down to use the facilities there, or the middle school has 7th grade teams and 8th grade teams. Depending on how we schedule the fields, the 8th graders could actually practice here and or have games. So it really depends on how we work that out.
Would we have coaching staff though? Because coaches from the middle school are teachers there, so.
They all aren't, and they're not all at the high school, so if we had 8th graders here and we actually decide to have practice here, I would really expect the coaches to get here, so.
Nick.
And have you also considered other combinations of options as opposed to just a single option or a combination thereof? I guess looking at
Option number 2, to basically move the 6th and 8th grade accordingly, redistricting on the elementary and keeping the Hurd School open as a combination of options to look at how do you level load even more so.
Yeah, I don't think the board's wedded to any one particular option. I think there are some combinations. I know they've had some discussion internally with, doing a phase-in where maybe we move the 4th grade one year and then we look at, moving the 6th or 8th or whatever the plan is down the road, that maybe that's just a short-term solution. So I think they're looking at any combination that seems to make sense.
I'm not sure if I understood you correctly, but I don't think closing the herd school is a given, whether it's this year or next year. I actually think we've heard quite a bit from people in the district suggesting this is not something that they're excited about. So I don't think anybody's saying that's a given.
So is the herd school in the, if you did the redistricting of the elementary, herd school was in the equation?
Correct.
To remain open?
Yes.
Just so I understand that.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Way up there. Oops, somebody's.
Hi, Michelle Dion, and I was just going to suggest that when you go through your deliberations and trying to come up with a solution, that you should also consider, and you probably already are, which options would have, I guess, the least desirable effect on the quality of the education of the students. That, you know, probably might want to think about ranking them in terms of the negative impacts. I have a daughter who will be a senior next year, and I certainly thought sending her back to do more time at the middle school was not going to add to the quality of her education.
Thank you.
I think we heard that a lot. So I think I can speak with almost complete confidence that option's probably not anything the board's going to entertain a lot.
If they do move, say the 8th graders here, how are they going to handle the lunch situation? I know my son, the first 2 weeks of school this year, did not get a hot lunch because he has third lunch and is at the other end of the school. And I was told that, well, he had salad bar available. And still now, unless he is like at the very beginning of the line, he doesn't get certain things that are available to the first 2 lunches. So how would they be able to handle more students and fit in another whole lunch?
Well, that's actually more an issue in terms of the schedule we create and how much time we allocate than the capacity of the building. So I think certainly we need to look at that if we're going to have more kids here. All we're saying at this point in time, you know, there's a lot of details to be worked out as the board moves forward on whatever their plan is. But I can tell you the building was built for 1,500 kids. We have roughly 1,000. So it's not so much the physical capacity of either the cafeteria or the serving line. It's more, you know, we try to have as much instructional time as we can. And maybe we need to look at the schedule in terms of making sure kids have enough time for lunch. But it's much more a scheduling than a building issue.
That's a good question, and we do hear a lot about lunch issues, so it is something, like Paul said, I think it's something. Right, I agree that it is something that we need to talk about, the availability of product for those kids, regardless of which plan we move forward. Go right ahead. Yes, yeah, can't talk.
Kathy has a copy of a letter that, I'm Ingrid Porter, and I am one of 9 core academic 6th grade teachers. And we got together a couple of weeks ago and composed a letter.
Thank you.
Just thinking about the idea of 6th grade moving to the high school. And I'll try to be brief in reading the letter. Dear SAD 60 Board of Directors, we, the undersigned educators at the Knowlton School, are writing to express our interest in the restructuring process being considered in our district. We believe that reconstituting the 6th grade school at a separate pod at Noble High School would be most advantageous for students, families, the district, and the budget. What follows is an outline of the collective reasoning that we, the 6th grade teachers at the Knowlton School, have collaboratively developed. We envision a unified 6th grade school that would operate independently of the high school, yet be housed within it. 12 years ago, the concept of an independent 6th grade school was developed within our district. The original intent of this school was to move upper elementary students from the self-contained classroom toward a diversified middle school program while retaining the best of elementary school ideals, and developmental practices. Sixth grade is a pivotal transition year for students. It is the first time that children from the 3 towns converge. Parents in the 3 communities and the school board agreed that a 6th grade school offered educators the unique opportunity to be particularly attentive to 6th grade student needs during this time of change. Presently, we have the fortuitous opportunity to revisit and refine the original intent of a 6th grade school that was created years ago. Rather than meld the 6th grade school with another grade, we can continue to develop the principles of the independent 6th grade program as our district undergoes restructuring. Housing all 6th graders in a completely separate pod at Noble High School will offer many more educational programming opportunities for these transitional students, provide the fledgling mentoring program at the high school a chance to flourish, and allow 6th grade students to become service learners as student helpers with Head Start preschoolers, thus beginning them on the road to community service. In addition, a separate 6th grade pod in the high school building would provide remedies for overcrowding challenges that the district currently faces. In so doing, disruption that would affect the district as a whole and students specifically would be notably minimized. Overcrowding at the Huzzy School would be alleviated by moving the 4th grade to Knowlton School. In addition, the potential would exist for North Berwick students to join the school if the North Berwick Community and Board decide that makes sense. If the 6th grade stays at the Knowlton School and is joined by 4th graders, overcrowding has only been shifted from the Huzzy School to the Knowlton School. Delivery and scheduling of specials, Excel, and RTI tiers, Lit Lab and Math Lab, would surely become much more complicated and less available for students. Moving the 6th grade to a separate pod at Noble High School would not disrupt grades 7 through 12 extracurricular schedules or busing, nor would high school juniors and seniors have a fractured experience in the last and most important transition that they make from our district. There are certainly issues which must be addressed when moving any new grade to the high school. We realize that not all of the issues are apparent at this time, but our group of educators is willing to continue to be innovative and proactive. We are volunteering to move, not simply to make it easier for our district, but also to continue to build on our district's vision of a unique and important transition experience for 6th grade students. And anyone who knows the 6th grade staff knows we're a diverse group of educators, and for all of us to think this is a good idea is pretty miraculous on its own.
Ingrid, can I ask you a question before you hand that off? How do you feel about the transition issue for 6th graders who would then go to the school, move back down to junior high, and then back up to the high school?
Well, currently, if you're from Lebanon or North Berwick, you're already making all those transitions. You're coming from your town to Knowlton School for a year and then going to another building. So it's really just going to a different building. And for many years, there weren't 5th graders at Berwick, so everyone had that transition experience.
Right. Thank you so much. That was really appreciated. I bet that brings lots of questions. Red sweater right there. Yes, thank you.
I think that's a really good idea. I just have a few questions about 6th graders using the library that the high schoolers use. It's not going to be the same grade levels for books. The art in the gym and stuff may not be as available as it would at the other schools. I'm just thinking, how would that work out? Like the extras, the specials, the things that the kids look forward to every week besides the education.
Ingrid, you want to take the second mic and maybe give thoughts about that?
And there are other 6th grade teachers here that can feel free to chime in on this.
Oh, there they are.
Well, my understanding is that all of the specialists in this building are K-12 certified. Is that accurate?
Probably, but I won't swear to it.
Okay. So there is the capability. I don't know if grade 8 comes and you'd need to also have extra classes available. We've been wrestling with some of those issues and thinking about this. We're excited about it, but there are definitely ideas like, how would administration work? Would there be a guidance counselor for 6th grade? There was one just for 6th grade when we were at the Knowlton School by ourselves, so some of those things would just stay in place. Library facilities, I would argue we've got some 6th graders that read at a pretty high reading level, yeah, and some that do not. And when 6th grade moved to the 6th grade building, they brought certain books with them from the 4 through 6 library collection. So lots of questions. Haven't thought through all the issues and answers, but we're pretty creative in the district.
I think Ingrid makes some good points, and I think what you'd see is a shifting of resources that are already there. We just have to reposition them. And actually, that solution you're talking about involves less shifting than many of the others. And yeah, go ahead. Oh.
Well, I agree with Peg and what Ingrid said. There are some things that are just a reallocation of resources, like moving the books in a library. I think some of the bigger issues are the sizing of the facility in terms of, now you're talking even younger kids. Our 6th graders have recess. There's no playground here. So I think there are some building issues. If we were to move a grade, I think that's why the 8th grade, being the closest in age and size to those kids, was something that we were entertaining.
One point that was also made by another staff member in the building was that high schoolers might be less likely to fraternize with 6th graders than 8th graders, and that might be a positive. It might not be as cool to hang out with the 6th graders, and that might allay some worries of 8th grade parents.
I have heard that from quite a few people too, as a positive for the 6th grade moving. Yep. I've got one here, and then we'll go over to Ruth.
Oh, just one more note
Sure.
about the library. The library at the Knowlton School was built from scratch when the 6th grade school started.
Didn't we do grant writing 12 years ago
Yeah.
for most of the, yeah, I remember.
So, you know, a lot of those books, the ones that would be appropriate to come with us, I'm sure would come with us, and the ones that are more appropriate for younger students would stay.
Right. Okay, there. And then you.
I was just wondering if anyone has anything negative to say about the enrollment across town lines, because I can't think of anything, and I'm planning on voting that way. So if anyone has anything negative, I'd like to hear it.
Okay, hang on to those. I've promised 2 people here, and then we'll go to those folks, because I agree. I have some interest in that too. So Ruth, oops, no, we're going way over here to Ruth first.
Ruth Grenier, I'm from Lebanon. I actually have a child at the Knowlton School, also one at the junior high and one here at the high school. I do like the idea of the 6th grade moving more so than I ever would the 8th grade. The 8th grade, you do worry about sports, but also all after school activities, whether it be chorus or band or any of the extracurricular. You're gonna be spending a lot more money on busing and on other expenses. Also, the kids, the transition in 7th and 8th grade from 8th to 9th is such a big jump to begin with in that year that if you start putting these 11, 12, almost 13-year-olds with the high schoolers, you're asking them to grow up a lot faster than we already are. And I wouldn't like to see that. I'd rather see at least the 6th grade, like they made the point. There's enough of an age difference that you could still have a mentoring process with your older kids, with the younger. And as far as possibly a playground or that type of thing goes, it's something that the district should look into, because we're already looking into the education, with educating with the babysitting type thing or any of that, of the childcare and all of that going on as it is. And that would be almost an extension of that, to have a more advanced playground that would tie in with anything to do with that.
That's an excellent point. Very good point. Marissa, right over here. And I see you folks up there. Nope, down here. Down to
Marissa Tasker from Berwick. I got questions for a couple of things. With the 6th grade moving up to the high school, couldn't they form that bond at the junior high school? Like, I know they want to keep 6th grade together to make a team, but couldn't they do that at any school and not just this school? Because I'm very blessed with children that need special education, and not the special education that is provided. My 13-year-old 8th grader, or 12-year-old 8th grader, came to the high school to take French 2 and excelled at French 2. Now he's a 13-year-old 9th grader taking French 3. By bringing these 8th graders up, you're giving them the opportunity to take these classes that is not provided. They hit a wall, and you can't go further. They take Algebra 1 in 6th grade, and they have to do it in front of a computer. How is that teaching them? They could do that at home for half the time and half the money. Well, I've done it. So having these kids have the ability to step up and exceed where they need to exceed, because in all these schools they hit a wall and they can't go further. So having the 8th graders in the high school, to me, is just a huge positive for these kids that need that extra, because you're moving these kids up when they're young. I know someone else who skipped 8th grade and went to 9th grade. You know, and saying, I can't expose my 8th grader to high schooler. They've been on the bus with these high schoolers for 3 years already. And for a Berwick parent, having these 5th graders on the high school is even worse, because these are 9-year-olds with these, not the high schoolers are bad, they just have different languages that a 9-year-old have. And I'm not saying that the high schoolers are evil, and keep all our kids away from them, because they're not. They're good kids. They're just more adult.
The opportunity piece for 8th graders was part of what we thought was a positive for moving 8th graders. It really is positive.
I really can't see anything negative, because they are so exposed on the bus already. Mm-hmm. So saying that they're going to be exposed to all these things, I just don't see it, because they're already exposed. And to expose them to a higher education and bring in, I've been thinking about this for weeks, sorry guys, and for bringing the 8th graders in, they get that 1 year of getting to know the school and getting to know the discipline of the school, and then starting their 9th grade year knowing the school and getting ready for college. They don't have that year of learning. They already had that year of growing in the school to move up to 9th grade.
You make some good points.
And then the only negative I have about redistricting or changing the town lines would be that kids that grew up at Huzzy from K1, 2, and 3 and had to spend another year at a new school to go to another school, and it'll be hard on those. And kids are really, we'll deal with it. But I think that's all for now.
Thank you, Marissa. Can I hang on for a second and go back to the question that was asked? People who have some negative, and I'll get to you guys if your questions are not related to this. Can I ask for people who have negative comments about the redistricting piece, about moving kids across town borders? Way up there.
So you're talking about like moving Diamond Hill Road to North Berwick, or
Right,
you talking
if
about
you
the
did
6th
that-
grade to the high school?
Correct.
Which one?
Oh, the first one.
The first one that you mentioned.
Because I got both.
Okay. You go.
I am blessed being a stupid person. I have a child in high school, no one, and then 2nd grade. So I am affected across the board here, because my child is going to come up through it. As far as the redistricting, my son is in 2nd grade. You're asking, and I would be affected by this. My son would be ripped from his friends, his teachers, the school that he has known. He is a boy, and he is only 8 years old. And you are going to ask him to move to a totally different school. No friends. Not having any idea who the teachers. It will be like entering kindergarten again. And this time, he's a great kid, and he adapts pretty quickly. But I don't want to see that happen to him. If you can tell me that you're going to grandfather these children that are already in these grades and let them stay and have overcrowding for X amount of time, I can understand that. Plus, my child goes to before and after care, where he would qualify to go to Hussey. Does that mean that I'm going to have to change my before and after care in order to get him in the school that he'd have to go to? How would that affect my child? I don't use the one at the school.
Right. You make good points. You make really good points. So, others about that?
Anita Habersettle. I am the librarian at the Huzzy School, and I think that shifting kids, changing the boundaries so that kids will go to different schools is not a good idea. I think emotionally it's not great for the kids. We talked about having smaller grade shifts so that kids went from one grade to the other instead of splitting them up from grade level to grade level. They get used to being with certain friends. They very much thrive on scheduling and what happens every day. And to rip them from that and suddenly place them in another school where they don't know anybody is really not a good idea for kids that age. I don't think they could handle it emotionally. Could I say something else about the 6th grade moving? They were talking about the library, and I can tell you because I helped set up the 6th grade library. It was comprised of books from Berwick Elementary School. When that school closed, we had to divide up the 4-5 collection there. The 4th grade came to the Huzzy School, 5th grade books and 6th grade books. Some of them went up to the Knowlton School. The same thing was done out in Lebanon when the 6th graders went up there. If you move the 6th grade to the high school, I'm not saying that's a bad idea, I'm just speaking from the library point of view. You can split the collection and move it up there, but you'd probably have to keep it separate. Just because you have 6th graders that are really good readers doesn't mean they should be reading books that have high school content. You have to be really, really careful about that. We're very conscious when we select books for our library that we consider not only the reading level of our students, but the chronological age of them. And just because they can read it doesn't mean they should.
Can I ask you another question then? How do you
Sure.
feel about the compatibility then of just bringing up 8th from a library point of view?
I think you'd have to have a separate area for the 6th graders. I don't think you would want them selecting books from a high school level.
But what if we,
just because of content.
what if we
For 8th graders?
Correct.
For 8th graders, it's probably going to be a little bit easier because they're that much older. 2 years is a big difference. 6th grade to 8th grade, both emotionally and socially, there's a huge difference.
Thank you. Thank you. Others? And then I'll come to you next. Way up in that corner.
Hi, I'm Hannah Rogers, and I'm a junior here. Some of the things that have been conflicting me with this whole idea is the fact that, if I'm not wrong, I thought that this school was created for high schoolers and for our learning and our benefit. Also, some of the classes that are available are classes that go from 9th grade to 12th grade. For example, a class that I'm in, it's TV productions, and that goes from 9th to 12th grade. And if that wasn't available, it kind of, I feel like it limits the opportunities to pursue what we want to do, what we want to go on for college. And I feel like going through, being at the school for 3 years, it's helped a lot realize what I want to go to school for. And if that was taken away from me and from friends of mine that are freshmen and sophomores, I feel like it would just be very different and very complicated for even if, I think I'm talking about if we were to move to the middle school and also if the 8th grade was to move up to here.
Okay, I think that first option you're talking about is off the table.
Okay.
We're not looking at moving the 11th and 12th grade. If 8th grade came up, I don't think it would remove opportunities from 9th to 12th.
Would the 8th graders be involved with the classes?
Largely, no. I think we're looking at having them, I mean, there may be some opportunities that they share, but I don't think that they're going to take away class opportunities from upperclassmen.
Okay.
I don't think that. Anybody? Paul?
Well, I think the general premise is to keep whatever grade is here, whether it's 6th or 8th, somewhat separate from the high school population. And we even had a floor plan at one of the previous meetings where the 8th graders, which was the plan at that time, used the back entrance, so they were somewhat separate. I think for most kids that would be the case, but as has been pointed out, I think we do have some kids who are advanced in 8th grade who probably could take, high school courses. Matter of fact, they take some of them now. So I think there would be some 8th graders who take some courses along with the high school kids, but I think probably 90-something% would be on a more separate basis.
And still, there is kind of a maturity level range too, from 1 year too. That's another thing.
That's true. Yep. We're trying to make sure we address all of those concerns. Down here.
Carol Merrill. I've been fortunate enough that the schedule's worked out. I've made all these meetings back as far as the workshop.
Thank you.
I think as a community, we're facing great challenges. I'm grateful to be a part of this community that comes together collectively. I'm impressed with the 6th grade teachers. I'm raising a grandson, so I haven't met this lot of 6th grade teachers, but I know all the old ones. And my thoughts are, this is really a multifaceted issue, and we all have little pockets that are most important and near and dear to our hearts. And we have common strings, all sorts of concerns. One of the things I wanted to ask tonight was the busing issue. We heard the answer to, what about sports? We can bus these kids. What about moving kids from Berwick, a long bus ride? Those costs are going to erode a lot of the savings. Those of us, and I am from North Berwick, who are hoping to save the Hurd School, at least until our kids outgrow it. The cost savings there, really, any way I slice it, I don't come up with huge cost savings by the time we offset everything. The cost savings, you're still going to need a copier lease because it's population-based and percentage per kids. You're still going to need a clerk fee, whether it's there or where. We still service the same number of children. So, you know, the biggest part of the cost saving there is the janitorial fee. You know, a little bit of a $10,000 electric bill, I get that, but I think that's short-term thinking. And we talk about the age of the building, and I think for those of us who don't live in North Berwick, it seems like a sort of easy answer. It's an antiquated building. I don't physically, am not in love with that building, but it's the community, and education isn't always about the physical structure and where we do things. So that's one concern. My second concern tonight is if one of the options is still the possibility of closing the Hurd School, and that the tax ramification would come back on the town of North Berwick. About 3 meetings ago, I believe the decision for contacting regarding this public hearing was going to be a bulk mailing. And I don't see very many taxpayers of the district here that don't directly have students involved. And my concern is, if these people aren't hearing this information as was planned, how does it impact it if it comes to a tax vote in the town of North Berwick?
We did not schedule that public hearing because I'm pretty sure that, as far as this board is concerned, that along with the
So
choice.
this isn't the public hearing that was discussed?
No.
Okay, that was one of my concerns.
No, I
Because
don't
I want them
speak
to have the information
for
they
the whole
need.
board, but I think we've not
No,
arrived at a
it wasn't
conclusion.
billed as such, and
Yeah.
we talked about a mail out, but then at the 11th hour or whenever it was, we decided to do the online survey instead. So
Right, what was, at the public input part of that meeting, the concern about doing an online was that many people don't have cable services right now. Many of the older people in the communities that would pick up that tax burden if they had the information they need don't have that capability. Because the secondary option, I think Ryan brought it up about sending it home in the backpacks, was we can't just have this be a parent or student's issue.
Correct.
It's a district-wide tax-based issue. So I just didn't know if this is the first of a public hearing. Is there a secondary meeting going to be held?
Am I
well,
not
I
correct
think
that we've-
first the board needs to, I think, set a direction because
Okay.
right now
I'm okay with that.
Okay,
I think the idea of the closing the herd has kind of been moving off the table,
That's
as
off
has
the
been
table,
alluded
I
to.
think, as far as the
So
board's
I don't.
concerned. Yeah, 2 things are off the table: moving the 11th and 12th back down to the middle school, and closing the Hurd School have really come off the table. We don't have time. If we'd chosen to go forward, I think, as Paul said at the meeting you were at, we would have needed to schedule that public hearing and move forward. I think the board heard loudly and clearly that there were 2 options, not like you're hearing me right now, that 2 options were not popular, and those were the 2 that weren't. So no, this is not the first of a public hearing to close the Hurd School.
Great, and I hope what you people have said.
The 2 options that I think I speak for the board, correct me if I'm wrong, that came off the table were moving 11th and 12th down to the middle school and closing the Hurd School. No, I don't, am I, Okay.
So Peg, thanks for the clarification, but I also
Yeah.
think it behooves us as a community as a whole in a district that I know proactively I'm going to make a bigger effort to get to some of these meetings years before it becomes a critical point. We all have busy lives. We all serve on different boards. But it certainly does, like it did 12 years ago before we got the new high school. It brings the parents back into the active status.
If I may, give a thank you to Eric, who is up above. We are being videotaped tonight for Channel 22 in Berwick, and hopefully we'll be able to share it with the other 2 towns. So we're extremely hopeful that we are able now to better get the word out to everybody, people who can't make these meetings as well. So, right. Our focus, and any board member wishes to speak, please do. We initially started this with, as Paul discussed, 2 issues: overcrowding at Hussey and trying to save some money. Herd School, we looked at it to see if it would be an opportunity for savings. As Carol pointed out, it really eroded into very little savings and a lot of heartache for people who are attached to that school in North Berwick, which is completely understandable to all of us. So that rather quickly came off the table. So the remaining really pressing issue we're faced with, and I'll mention another, there are really 2 from my position as board chairman right now, is 1, the overcrowding issue at Hussey, which is going to get worse quickly. We need to find a solution there, and these are sort of the options we're looking at. We're trying to determine how much we can do and in what time frame we can do it. The other is our superintendent is retiring, and as he explained, he's been in the district for a very long time, and it's really a big deal for this board, and so our focus really needs to be directed on what direction we go in next in that regard, in addition to trying to alleviate a rather critical overcrowding problem. So those 2 things are off the table, and I see we have a bunch of hands. Can I ask for just a quick show of hands for people who think the redistricting issue is a good idea? You'll have the opportunity to put your dots up too, I'm just curious.
The town lines, you mean?
Moving, yeah, balancing out the elementary school grades. Okay, thank you. Now, back to questions and comments, and we have a bunch more. Nita, I'll get back to you. Let's go over to this side, way over on the corner. The young man.
Hi, I'm Jesse Allman. I'm actually a homeschooler. I was in the 7th grade school last time I was in public school. The one thing I have to say about this is if you guys do move the grades around between schools, is that if it keeps growing at this rate and seeing how Hussey School's overfilled right now, once they get up to high school or middle school, you guys are just going to have to go over this again in like 3 to 5 years. So.
Correct. Yep, numbers do change. We've seen some changing predictions just over the past 2 years, but you're absolutely right.
And to kind of piggyback off that, my name is Mindy Alman. We moved from Somersworth because we didn't want our kids going to the secondary level in Somersworth. And they do have a little bit of a difference in how they do those secondary levels, but basically I'd ask you to keep in mind the emotional levels and what the kids will be exposed to when you look at moving kids around, because it didn't work in Somersworth and they're really having a hard time recovering. And it's a big problem over there. So really keeping in mind what kids are seeing and what they're exposed to. Seeing it on the bus, they're supervised. There are times in the school building where they're not supervised with the older kids, and there's a lot that they will be exposed to. And like you said, when my daughter came in kindergarten, we were told this is the biggest class that they'd had. So I'm interested in how you've looked at those numbers. They're in 5th grade now. They're gonna, are we just moving this for a year or 2, or is this really a long-term solution so that we don't have to go through this again?
Mindy, which solution do you think is a good idea?
I like the idea of moving a younger grade into the high school if it's self-contained. Limited time exposure to the older kids. I think that would be a good idea, as long as the other resources can be established so that, for instance, they aren't using the library, they aren't, that they have their own almost self-contained school.
Thank you.
I think the answer to your question is this building was designed for close to 1,500 students. If you look at the enrollment projections, which have tracked fairly well. Even going out 10 years, our high school population stays about the same at around 1,000. So moving 6th grade, kindergarten, 8th grade, whatever grade that we might move, is generally around 250 kids. So certainly the capacity going out 10 years, which is about as far as we can see out, is here to add one more grade reasonably comfortably, whoever they might be.
Okay. How about, trying to do this fairly, how about the brown jacket right over to the right? There you go. Correct. Well, I say we have not formally made a decision. If everybody in this room stuck all their dots on that paper, boy,
Right.
we probably ought to have another
We're
conversation
going with the
about
presumption
it.
that no one's going to put dots on things they don't like, so
Right.
some things will become self-evident. Where we had started with at least 2 of these plans, we didn't want to just not have some conversation further with the public and kind of confuse them. My assumption is, especially the infamous 6 through 10 at the high school, wasn't going to have any dots, so I think direction will become clear to the board.
We actually did talk about doing that, taking those off. But in all fairness, we had promoted this opportunity for the public to come and talk. And we felt like if we did that, we weren't actually doing what we said we would do. So they're all here. From our point of view, we've heard loud and clear that those are the least favorite. So I don't want anybody under the impression that we're looking to close the Herd School from this side of the table at this point. So right next to you. Yep.
I'm looking up there, and I mean, one of the things that I was just wondering was, again, I kind of like Paul, I'm older than dirt. I've been around for a while. The junior high, when I moved here, was the high school. It was designed for 4 grades, yet I don't see an option of just moving the 6th grade to be with 6th, 7th, and 8th like Marshwood, as Marshwood has their 6th, 7th, and 8th together, and have a true middle school, junior high experience for these kids, where they could still be separate but together, and not exposing 6th grade to the high schoolers, which I would be very fearful of. I love the 6th grade teachers, but there's no way you can protect them 100% of the time. And 8th graders, I'm not as fearful. I don't have a girl, so it'd be different for me. I'll be honest. If I had a girl, but I mean, I just don't understand why we couldn't just look down that road.
There are an infinite number of combinations of these plans, and we have talked about, as Paul alluded to right at the beginning, doing one step at a time, like moving 4th grade this year, maybe moving 6th grade next year, 8th grade, and at each point you'd have an opportunity to see where the dust falls. So that's not an option. I think it's just hard to talk about all of the different things that we could do, but that's certainly one that I would add to the list of choices where you have the opportunity to do that.
I think in an ideal world, that would be a really good solution to have a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade middle school. The old Noble High School was built for 4 grades, but it was built in 1969, where we had about 100 kids in a grade. That was the size of the district then. It was only built for 400 or 500 students, and if anyone remembers, before we built this building, we had more kids out in modular classrooms than we did in the building. And if you look at the capacity, we can do about 500 kids at what is now the middle school. With 2 grades, we'd be 430. You add another 250 kids, which is what we have in a grade. You're talking about 700 kids. That's why we just can't make a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade middle school work at the current middle school.
How about we come down right to the corner? And then I've got a couple over here we've got to catch up to.
I was just wondering if we're voting tonight, but is there any other time when other people who are not here tonight can't be here? Can they vote as well? And are you going to put up some of the newer options on the website? Maybe they can do a new survey or vote at that point.
That's a good suggestion. Yep.
I think that's up to the board. We have a regular board meeting Thursday night, and this is an agenda item just to either bring it to some closure or to see where the board wants to go, and that certainly could be an option, I guess.
Pass it So you pick, and then we'll catch everybody there.
I don't think I can fairly vote not knowing about the 6th grade option. So can you explain to me then who would be, do we have deans in 6th grade? Would my child be coming to the high school to see the nurse? Where would the guidance? I need all of that information before I can make a fair vote, if that's something I'm in favor of.
Good question.
Well, this is just a concept that the 6th grade teachers came up with last week. So we haven't worked out all the details, and one of the things that we're trying to do is just to get a sense of some direction and then begin to fill that in. You know, our simple answer is if we continue to use a note, say the 6th grade comes up here, well, the Knowlton School will continue to be used, probably as Berwick's 4th and 5th grade. They will need a nurse, so the nurse in that building probably cannot come up here. So the existing nurse staff would probably continue to work with that additional population. So there's a lot of details that remain to be worked out, whatever the plan is. I think right now we're just trying to get a sense, are people comfortable with 6th graders being in this building or not? Or 8th graders or whoever it might be.
Okay, yep, hang on a second. Oh, Jen? Oh, well.
This is very small. I just want to be cognizant of the fact that currently our graduation rate, I've seen different numbers, 25 to 30%. By 2015, by law, we must graduate 90%. If we have to hit that target, how does that affect our numbers? And I'm just wondering if we're cognizant of that as we look at these projections. Because that's the reality high school is facing. 90% must by law graduate by 2015.
I am aware of that. Yeah.
Is that in your projected spacing numbers? I haven't heard that from any.
I'm not sure.
Not specifically, Jen, but we're averaging about 250 a grade. So if we have 4 grades and if every single youngster stays and doesn't drop out, you're still talking a high school population of about 1,000. When we designed the building, we were averaging about 300 a grade. So we had, at some point in time, 12 to 1,300 kids, and we built the building for a little growth, but the numbers have gone the other way.
There is a student, I believe, there. Somebody's had their hand up there for quite a while. Yep, there you go.
Hi, I'm Zach Murphy. I'm in 11th grade, and stop laughing at me. And honestly, I think moving 8th grade up here is a horrible idea. And if you're gonna move a grade up here at all, I think it should be 6th grade. Because honestly, high schoolers just don't get along with 8th graders at all. I can tell you that. And if there are 6th graders up here, I feel like I wouldn't talk to them at all. And there would be less interactions. But honestly, I'm not just coming from me, but I can tell you other students in this school will talk to them. And I'm just saying, stuff happens. And it's just, I don't think it's a great idea at all.
Okay. Thank you very much. Hang on, I had somebody, who did you want with that? Mrs. Kelly in the white sweater.
My name is Barbara Kelly, and I commend the 6th grade for coming up with their idea. But as a mother of a 6th grade girl, my concern is you can't guarantee that those 6th graders are not going to interact with the high schoolers. You talked about your concern with lunch, overcrowding of lunches. Are they going to be matriculated in with the high school lunches? There's a lot of places that you cannot guarantee that 6th grade is not going to have the interaction with the high schoolers, that they're not going to see what these high schoolers do. Coming from a teaching background, these high schoolers do a lot of things that I don't want the 6th graders to see. And they shouldn't see. It's bad enough on the bus, really. So before you make this decision, I think you need to think emotionally, and can you realistically keep the 6th grade contained? Realistically, could you keep the 8th grade contained? And it's probably no, you can't.
Thank you. Laura Foster, Neil, write down.
I don't need the mic.
Yes.
I have a very simple question. When do we need to decide this by? Because I have a lot of books to move.
I hear you. If we want to do this by fall, we probably need to arrive at a conclusion relatively soon.
Right, so there really isn't a timeline, I guess.
We're doing our best to give everybody a good amount of opportunity to be involved in this discussion, but I don't know, Paul, do you have a drop-dead date in mind?
Well, if we're to do anything next year, certainly by the time we finalize the budget, because if we're talking about a playground here for sixth graders or whatever it is, we need to know that. But I think the board's trying to take their time and make a good decision, and we don't absolutely have to do something for next year. We just need to start addressing this issue at some point.
Okay, how about right down here? And then we'll go over to Anita. I'll get you next. First down here, and then we'll go up to Anita. Go right ahead.
Can we please use the microphones?
Nope, never mind, can't hear.
And if it was a plan, I'm happy to hear that the Herd School is off the table, unlike, we all are. But if it was a choice of moving, I do agree with the sixth grade, moving them up. And I know as a parent, I work very hard at teaching my daughter right from wrong, what she needs to do. And if more parents paid more attention to their children instead of depending on the teachers to do it for us, I think it would work out.
Thank you very much. And back up to Anita Haberzetta. And then we'll do you next, and we'll head back this direction.
I'm actually glad to hear that the board is considering definitely not closing the Herd School. I'm not convinced that's the best idea. I was just wondering, though, if you've given some thought to the recommendations by the Harriman Associates who did this study to move those rooms that are in the basement of the Herd School to another place. I don't know where you would move them because there really isn't room upstairs. But having the library down in that area, which is, it's a basement, it's not horrible, but it's not the best situation. Is there any consideration given to shifting things around there and also reestablishing a true computer lab for those 4th and 5th graders that are going to stay there?
If I may, that's probably a conversation for the meeting that we have when we go to, as you know, Anita, we spend time in each school during the course of the next month or two. That's probably a conversation we should have when we are at the school. That would definitely be a great thing to bring up for the building administrator when we're there.
Okay.
Right next.
My name's Jason Habersettle. I was actually one of the first 11th graders into the school. And about that time, I remember that was when the Knowlton School first became a 6-only school. And I just thought it was interesting to bring up everyone's having all these ideas of, high schoolers being a bad influence on the 6th graders. I remember the first year that the Knowlton School was 6-only, there's a huge uproar and the district had to do an entirely separate run of buses because they're afraid that 6th graders being on the bus, it would be such a bad influence. And that lasted for about a year until the bus drivers almost revolted because it turns out the 6th graders were the problem and not the high schoolers.
Yes, you make a good point.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that was very true. If we want to, we'll move to the left. Yes.
Hi, John Curtis from North Berwick. What is the cost of these various plans? I mean, there has to be a cost associated with fuel, transportation, upkeep of buses, additional staffing. And has anybody looked at the long-term cost of these plans compared to the cost of a bond or a loan to add in addition to the Hussey School? And would that tax burden for the Hussey School be across the district, or would it be just for Berwick?
It would be across the district, and I'm fairly confident that we're not looking at any option, and correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, that would come close to the cost of putting an addition on the Hussey School.
What is that cost?
Of putting an addition on?
No, for these various plans.
Well, it really depends on which plan. Most of the plans don't have significant costs because we already have the staff teaching the 8th graders or the 6th graders. It's more of a one-time cost to move the 6th grade up or whatever. Depending on the plan, say it's a 6th grade here, then we probably would need to talk about a playground. There'd be some cost to that where we wouldn't if it's the 8th grade. So we just need to come to terms on what direction we're going so we can begin to figure out what it is. But most of the cost is in staff, and we already have the staff, they're just in different places. There was some savings to close the Hurd School. You know, if we move the 6th grade here or the 8th grade here, they already ride the same bus already, so there's no transportation costs. So most of them are minimal costs. Roughly figure on an addition to the Hussey School, if you were talking something on the lines of 20,000 square feet, which would be probably 12,000 in classroom space, because we have to build classrooms at about 1,000 square feet now, and then do something with the CAF. School construction costs right now nationwide are running about $200 a square foot. So you're talking somewhere in the order of like $4 million for an addition to the Hussey School, and that would be something like $300,000 a year for a 20-year bond. So that's roughly what we'd be looking at.
So there'd be no additional cost for transportation of the additional students?
Well, 6 through 12 rides together now, so it simply is that if the 6th graders came here or the 8th grade, they're just getting off at a different school.
Okay, want to keep moving to the left? Whoop.
Really quick comment. My name is Tracy Lago. I have a child in junior high and also here at the high school. I don't believe in rushing into things, but I'm also a believer in deadlines, and I think if things just go in a discussion mode without giving people specific deadlines that when things are going to happen, no one will really take it seriously.
Well, I think once we finish this conversation tonight, we'll have a much better idea. And again, it is on the agenda for Thursday night's meeting as well, at which point we may feel like we have enough input to move forward.
And I apologize, I messed them all up because now they have to look for a superintendent, so I think I threw a monkey wrench into things. I'm sorry.
Yes. Okay, next.
I'm Julie Dyer. I'm one of the 6th grade teachers. And I just wanted to emphasize that the 6th grade staff is 100% aware of the concerns about the interaction. It was the very first thing that came up when we had our first meeting to talk about it, because we knew it would be a huge issue for parents. It's a huge issue for us. I don't think any of us are going to go on record as making a guarantee that a 6th grader is never going to encounter a high school student if this were to happen. But I would like to kind of emphasize the fact that we are very excited about this potential, and we are committed to making it work. And we are every bit as concerned about those kinds of things and would work diligently to make sure that those things don't happen. I mean, we talked about everything from separate bathrooms to a separate entrance and separate lunch times, and you know, anytime the children are leaving the 6th grade area, they would be escorted by at least one teacher. I mean, we are very aware of things and are working on answering some of these questions that folks are coming up with tonight. We don't have every answer, but we would like to pursue the idea if folks support the idea.
Sure. Okay, yep. Okay.
I didn't see an option for, although I do see the space for children who live in Lebanon who are in 6th grade to go to school in Lebanon in those schools. North Berwick, same thing. 4th, 5th, and 6th grade for Berwick go to the Knowlton School. I don't see that as an option. Was that ever
We did talk
explored?
about that, but there actually is not space. Am I correct?
Not enough?
Yeah.
No, that was one of the impetus behind the 6th grade school originally was when we had 6th grade in the towns, we were overcrowding, and so moving the 6th grade to Knowlton created space for Lebanon, for North Berwick particularly. They go down, but it was something like on the order of 20 students in Lebanon and maybe 50 in North Berwick. And if you looked at We average, say, in Lebanon, 4 teachers per grade level. So to bring the 6th grade back, we'd be looking at needing 4 classroom spaces, say, either at the Hanson School or Lebanon Elementary, and they simply aren't there. So.
How many children from Berwick are going to go to Lebanon? You're going to have less than 4 classes.
Because they're spread out over 5 or actually 6 grades, so you're only talking a couple of kids per grade, which is different than saying we're moving an entire grade level and needing 4 teachers for that.
Do you still have a question down here? Yep, down, down. Okay, you're next. Go right ahead.
Sorry. I wanted to get back to the across town lines option, because it seems like whether we move the 6th grade up or the 8th grade up, we're still going to have an overcrowded problem in the future on the Knowlton School with just the 4th and 5th. And we're moving the 6th grade into a high school that has room now, but according to the feasibility study, they said something about the high school, in order to find the classrooms, the high school classrooms would go from 20 to 25 students. I just read that in the feasibility study on the online. So I was wondering if Berwick was broken down geographically, then, and you're spreading the students out, then all the schools that have room are getting more students, and the schools that don't have any room are losing students. It just made more sense to me at the time. And I just wondered if we could talk about that a little more.
Talk about the redistricting
Yeah,
option
if
more?
the board has really discussed it, or if you simply read it online and you're just throwing it up, or is it going to be a discussion outside of this meeting at any
Probably
point?
depends on how many of you are really interested in that as an option being pursued. So have we talked about it?
Not a
It
lot.
was a
I think we wanted to
suggestion.
get a sense of where the public might be.
Okay.
And it really depends. Right now in Berwick, we have roughly 110 to 120 students per grade level. So if the 6th grade were to move out of Knowlton, wherever they might wind up, whether it's the middle school or the high school, you're talking a building that, depending on which study you want to look at, has a capacity for 350 to 500 students. In Berwick's 4th and 5th grade would be on the order of 250 students. So if the 6th grade goes wherever they might go, certainly Knowlton has the capacity to handle Berwick's projected enrollment growth for the foreseeable future.
And let me remind you, this was not one of the suggestions we originally reviewed. This is a suggestion that's come to us more recently. So do we have all the answers about that? No, it's relatively
But
new
it's
to the
something
table.
that you're putting on the table, so to speak, and so you will discuss it more as
I
a board.
imagine we will, depending on the level of interest that it receives. Yeah. And right down up front here if you can, and then we'll go back over to that side. Right here. No. I already skipped him once, right up here. Thanks. Yeah, no.
Hi, John Sheedy from Berwick. It's probably more of a comment than a question, but obviously with some of the options being relatively new, just coming from the survey, there's probably more questions than answers, right? And I think also with a number of them, we probably don't know all the questions, or not having seen some of these before. And it was interesting to hear a perspective of someone who had moved into town experiencing something similar to one of the options from Somersworth. So I think in terms of whichever one seemed to be the more popular options to look into, it probably would be good for us all to look at, whether it's neighboring school districts within the state or neighboring states. Some of these may have been done or tried in other districts. So if there's a way to kind of see if other districts have tried similar things, what's worked, what's been challenges, right? So we've heard, I think, one example from Somersworth, and I'm sure that maybe not all of them, but some of the options or some form of several of them have probably been tried somewhere else, maybe successfully, maybe not. So we could probably learn a lot from that, because we won't think of all the things. You know, we'd pick one and go down the path, and we're still going to uncover things, right? So the more that we could look into some of those on those top 2 or 3 choices, maybe.
It's an excellent choice. We did a lot of that for parents who were around during the time, and teachers who were around during the time of the formation of the 6th grade school. There was a lot of work that went into looking at different combinations of those age children. So we do have a lot of that. I think a lot of what we're doing here is really just wanting to hear from parents sort of emotionally where they're at. And then the budgeting issues and the details of how we do it, this board will have to look at ways to do that in the environment of no money. So we certainly aren't putting things on the table we want to do that are going to cost a lot of money, but we want to make sure we do things that are sort of the most palatable to the people of the district. And that's a really good point, looking at not reinventing the wheel, but going around.
We could learn from other districts, right?
Correct.
Well, I know the board's had some conversation that, a junior, senior high school that has 7th and 8th grade along with high school students is a model that is actually fairly common. And I think when we talked about it, I think half the members of the board went, and I did, to a junior and senior high school. And I won't use myself as an example. That's probably a bad example, but that is not an unheard of combination. So I think that has, fueled some of the conversation, I guess.
Right.
Can I have the specifics of the Summersworth grade level?
Oh, did you want to ask what the concerns were?
Mr. McKay would like to know, what actually did Summersworth do?
Mindy?
The specific grade combinations that Summersworth had?
They had, it's been a while. They have 1 through 4th in their elementary school. They have 5th and 6th grade. They have 7th and 8th grade, and they have 9th through 12th grade. However, the buildings are all connected, so the kids are all they intermingle within each other throughout the day.
So they moved the 5th grade up to the middle school over there. Is that what they did?
Right.
So it's 5 through 12 with the connection. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay, a couple more down in this corner. You guys can pick wherever you can get to with the mic first. Thank you. Nice to go up there.
When it comes to moving the 8th grade, I'm Allison Grant, I'm a sophomore. When it comes to moving the 8th grade up to the high school, there is a transition from 8th grade to freshman year. That's a really important transition. Freshman year, kids mature a lot. They kind of go from being at the top of the food chain at the middle school to kind of realizing, they have to kind of grow up in the high school. And I know from personal experience that is a really important transition. And I feel like if the 8th grade came up to the high school, as much as they would be separated, or as much as people would try to separate them, they would do their best to try and mingle because they'd, be with all these high schoolers. They wouldn't want to be off by themselves. They'd want to be talking to these people. They have kids that they knew when they were in 7th grade and they had a class just above them. So they would try and mingle a lot, and I feel like that would mess with the whole transition. And I know that's a very important transition. It was in my life, and I wouldn't want to mess with that. So I like the idea of the 6th grade coming up, but I also like that someone brought up having a junior high with 6th, 7th, and 8th. But
Won't
either
fit.
way.
That one won't fit. Thank you. Okay, up in the back corner right next to you. There you go.
Hi, my name is Ryan Pease. I have 2 children in the Huzzy School. And I think for any of us, I'm not blessed with older children to really understand, and I try and think through my 8th grader, my 8-year-old being an 8th grader and going into the high school. But rationally sitting here thinking that we're almost into February, I tried to educate myself the best I could with that study, and it was a lot of information, and I tried to digest it the best I could. It seems like there's going to be a lot of restructuring in this high school to move any grade in here. And I think to try and make that decision so quickly to then potentially in a year or 2 have to restructure that. I sat through a lot of the meetings last year when there was a lot of discussion about the pods. And again, I can't even begin to understand this. I could barely get kindergarten with 120 kids. But it was a lot, and there was a lot of passion, and there was a lot of passion from the teachers and the students. So we're gonna disrupt this potentially again to not even know if it's truly gonna work and be anything that's long-term. And somebody had said that there's not an immediate need, and there really is in the Huzzy School. There is an immediate need to do something. And I think that rationally speaking, the easiest and kind of the least transition would probably be to move that 4th grade up, because next year, realistically speaking, you're going to have 6 kindergarten classes coming into the Huzzy School, and you're going to have 5 that are leaving 4th grade. So we need another classroom. And I'm not sure where that's coming from, but that's going to happen in September. So there's a lot of passion. I think this is fantastic, and I applaud all of you for all of the opinions that you guys take from us. But we do need timelines, and we need to think about this, and we need to think about the 4th graders that are in the Huzzy rate, or the 3rd graders that are in the Huzzy now, that next year may have to go to a new school, you know, just to prepare them and start thinking about that transition and what that's going to look like. You know, another 3rd grade teacher in the Huzzy School, there's just so much going on in that school, and I know that is not a huge concern for the 2 other towns that are here. But if you're in that school and you've been in that school for a few years, it's a big concern, and to have to, I sit there anxiously. I'll come to every meeting from January until the end of the year to hope that each year you're going to give that grade level the teachers that they need, so we don't have 25, 26, 27 students. Really, at the end of the day, that's where my concern is. I want my child to be in a classroom that's adequately sized with a teacher that can educate them at the level that they need to be educated, not one of 26 and 27 and 28, which could potentially happen if we don't make some sort of decision by September, but not one so rash that we have to kind of disrupt an entire high school to do it.
We hear you, definitely. Thank you. And a couple more in that corner.
I'm Kathy Nato from North Berwick, and I'm an educator. And I guess I understand that a lot of this is a numbers, money game, but I just really hope that you'll take into consideration the education of these children, sort of to piggyback on what she just said. And also from the teacher's perspective, to really give them time. Talk about having this happen in the fall is fast. And I just hope that whatever decision is made, people have time to really digest it. And if new teams are created, if the curriculums from different towns are coming together, I hope that people have time to really figure it out, you know, and not just be thrown in.
We very much understand that concern. One thing that would hit us the other way is if we rushed into a decision in order to make one to meet some artificially created timeline. We want to hear from everybody, and I guarantee you we will create a timeline very shortly. But giving people that opportunity to participate in this conversation is really important to this board. And then the other part, the Vivian Hussey part, we very, very, very much understand. Giving teachers the opportunity and children the opportunity to adjust to that, we wish we had more time. I wish we weren't in this crunch that we're in. We don't control that, unfortunately. It's been getting incrementally worse at a pace that we did not anticipate. If you look at it relative to other towns, there's no way anybody would have anticipated that. So we hear you, and all of those things are near and dear to our heart. We wouldn't be sitting at this table if the education of the kids in the district weren't our primary concern. So we definitely hear you.
I think with you doing a superintendent's, I'm Kathy Carney, I'm the Excel teacher at the Knowlton School. With you doing a superintendent search this year, on top of everything else, that it probably would behoove you to not toss the whole district up in the air at the same time. And one of the solutions that doesn't do that is to just move the 6th grade. Really it doesn't. Oh. Otherwise, you're going to be moving 4th, you're going to be moving 6th, you're going to be divvying up the junior high, you're going to be trying to figure out what to do with 8th, and
really, in all seriousness, it is one of the things I like about that plan. It really does minimize the amount of moving around.
It minimizes the disruption. A former staff member at our school, we've been through many iterations. This is my 10th year here, and she calls it the TJ Maxx School, never the same place twice.
I'm so sorry. That's right.
But I got to tell you, in my 10 years there, I think the most creative energy that I've seen is when we had the discussion, when I last week and talked together about what we could build if we were able to go back and revisit the sixth grade school plan, look at what worked, look at what didn't work, look at what needs to be updated because society and technology have changed. We were really excited about it.
I have to commend you all for being an incredibly adaptable staff, because I'm looking at the same faces I was looking at 12 years ago when we moved you all around then, and that you have this ability to get together and come with such a cohesive plan is very much appreciated. So, and the energy that's behind it. Anybody else in the quadrant right here that we've missed? One or two more over here? None. Then we'll do one more round here.
Hello?
And then we have a couple board members
Hi.
who'd like to speak.
I'm Thomas Pavador. I'm a junior here at Noble High School. And I think the general consensus that I think we've come to is that none of the high schoolers want any children at our school.
I think we've heard that.
And that none of the parents of those children want their kids anywhere near us. So I just want to speak in favor of redistricting, just according to like where you live in the area, because if you put 8th graders or 6th graders or anyone else here at the high school, when those classes come here and you need that space, you're just going to have to move them away anyway. And if you just redistrict, you're putting all of the school buildings that we already have to optimal use because there's no overcrowding anywhere. I know one of the concerns that was voiced by the parents was that there's like emotional distress on kids if they have to move. I moved to the Knowlton School from a different country. And I think that generally speaking, kids aren't that bad and that teachers are pretty kind. So, like, you're going to a school that's not overcrowded and getting a quality education is worth more than your kid being uncomfortable for, a few months. So I just think redistricting would be the best.
The only place I'd challenge you on that is the high school is the most underutilized building we have. So as we look at really good usable space, it's hard to take that off the table as a spot. We will have a lot of schools that are running near capacity if we just redistrict. And I do sort of have to say that I think taking students from one town, sending them to another town, maybe not for future kids coming in to that sort of a system, but for young kids who are going to be pulled out and moved, I sort of do sympathize with that being. I have an 8-year-old too, so I, along with the person who said that before, I think it is a little stressful on a child that age to take them and send them to a town they're not familiar with. Anybody else? One more up front. Thank you.
My name's Robert Metropolis. I graduated from Noble last year. I just wanted to point out that I've made the transition from 8th grade to high school in this district, and it's difficult. And I've watched other classes after me make that same transition. But I think that the maturity level of our school is from the 8th grade to the high school. That's the huge transition. If 8th graders went to school here already, I think that maturity factor would just start at a younger level. And I think that's a very good idea. I think sending 6th graders to this school, the things high schoolers say and the things that go on in this high school, I wouldn't want, if I had a 6th grader or a little sibling, I wouldn't want the 6th grader just to see what happens here. And it's not that it's always bad, sometimes it's good, but I just worry that 6th graders going to school here would not be the best option, even if they were secluded into their own section. I also think that 8th graders, there's so many options here at the high school that 8th graders could take advantage of. The art classes we have at the high school, the programs we have at the high school, the special ed program is absolutely amazing. So I think that 8th graders coming to this high school would completely add another, I don't know how to word it, but I think that it's a lot better than moving 6th graders here in the long run, because I think maturity really needs to be worked on in this district, and I think that if you're doing it at a younger age, it would be a lot better.
Thank you for that perspective. Okay, is there anybody over here that, how about Ruth? And, yeah. Oh, go right ahead, and then Ruth, I'll come down to you.
I know before I did speak out about, the 6th graders not coming, or coming here not
Don't
being,
forget to vote if you're leaving.
Yeah.
Just
the
want to
6th
remind
graders coming
people.
here not
Put your
being
dots on.
as big of
go.
an issue as some people are making out to be. That being said, I still believe, just like the previous person just said, the 8th graders coming here is a much, much better idea. And, you know, thinking that you can have like an entirely separate 6th grade school here and not having them interact at all, I think is really a fallacy. There's only one set of core spaces in here. They'd still be using the same cafeteria, the same gym, the same library. You can't separate everything they do. And the 8th graders, maturity-wise, would be much more able to integrate into the school culture and into society in the school.
Thank you. Right down front.
Just a quick question on the option of moving the 4th graders to the Knowlton School. The stats here are saying that the Knowlton School is already past capacity, but you said there is room that it actually can house about 500 students?
That's what it was built for. Yeah.
Okay. Looking at it and knowing the district going through with having to get another superintendent with other things that have to go on, wouldn't that be the least intrusive to take the Berwick students that are already in Berwick and just move them across town and to leave everything else in the district as is, and then visit the idea if we still see enrollment increasing in another year, 2 years, to at least be able to push it out and to be able to spend the right time that needs to be spent and to be able to actually crunch the numbers and say option 1 is going to cost this amount of dollars, option 2 is going to cost this amount, and option 3 will save us this down the road. But that way we will truly be voting on something that we can all feel confident as taxpayers, but also as parents with our kids in the system, that they're going to get the best bang for their buck as well in their education.
We have talked about making that being a potential. That is one of the options that's on the table, definitely. Okay. Anybody have anything to add that's different, that is rather unique, that we haven't talked about? Marissa?
A follow-up with the 4th grade moving into the Knowlton School. I think it's a very easy fix, and it makes a lot of other places happy. It's putting stress from one school onto another school.
Yes, it is.
We are adding 5 4th grade classes this year, but next year you're going to have to add 6.
Correct.
And then you're going to have to add 6 4th grade and 6 5th grade. So you're going to have to actually find 2 more classes than what you actually have on your map.
It may be a one-year solution.
I think it's a short-term solution, because whatever scenario you look at, whether it's the 8th grade going somewhere or the 6th grade, part of the solution of the crowding at the Hussey School, absent building an addition, is to move the 4th grade to Knowlton. So it's just a question of when do you do that, and is that phase 1 of a multi-year plan or what? So you're right, I think that's not a permanent solution, but it does buy a year where the board can look at some other options.
One of my bigger concerns about that choice is it's a good choice. It's a good short-term solution, but we're putting back that schedule shift that we just took away. And I don't know, is Ron's not here. Is Ron here? Yeah, Ron, I think, can speak to getting rid of those 2 separate schedules was really nice for the school. Putting it back in there turns it back into Grand Central Station with buses and people coming and going. What's it? So I feel a little bad about that option in that regard, but it may be, in terms of having to also be looking at a superintendent search.
You're right, it's not ideal, but to put the 4th and 5th grade back on a quote elementary schedule, 1, gets them off the bus with the bigger kids, and 2, it does spread out that pickup and dismissal time, so we don't have some of the so we don't just move the traffic issue that we have at Hussey to the Knowlton School.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, absent the ability to build space exactly where we need it for exactly what we need, there's no perfect solution. So we're just trying to look at what are the best options possible with the facilities and the space that we have.
Right behind you. There you go.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Haberzettel. I'm a substitute in this district right now. I'm also an alumnus. And granted, I came late to this meeting, so there's probably a lot I didn't hear. But hearing what I have heard, it seems like moving any students anywhere is a really bad and frankly unfeasible idea. And adding on to the existing schools seems like the only idea that's actually going to solve problems without ruining everyone else in the process. You said moving students across town lines or moving them from one school to another is going to be a big shakeup for the kids, which even if they overcome, you've got to get them to the other schools from a different town. I don't know how you plan to do that. Other schools in the meantime are overcrowded. Schools that aren't overcrowded, if you shift students there, are going to get overcrowded. I don't care what your projections say. So it seems like the only thing we can do is to look seriously at what it's going to take to build an addition to the high school, which is already holding more grade levels than it was ever designed to. The Hurd School either needs to be fixed or outright plowed under and replaced. I've seen the Lebanon schools. They're about the same size and shape and condition as North Berwick. So in a few years, we're probably going to be talking about Lebanon the same way. So yes, it's going to cost millions of dollars to build additions to either of those schools, but, well, how badly do you want your kids to have a good education?
I hear you, and I think in an ideal world, everybody'd like to put up a new building. I don't think the taxpayers of Berwick, and I don't know, I can only really speak for Berwick, can afford it. I mean, that's a lot of money. There are no monies available for that, so it would fall directly on the backs of the taxpayer of the district. And frankly, it would be hard to do that with so much room available at the high school. So, anybody else, if we can come over this way, we've got a couple people here who haven't spoken yet too. Right down in the middle here, middle front. There you go.
Or unique, but I just can speak emotionally about, I only have one child, she's a 8-year-old daughter, and she's in 3rd grade, and I think a couple of things is that, I just can't see her at this school in 2 years, 3 years, I don't see that. I don't care what anybody says about keeping these children separated. I know she does karate, so she'll be able to take care of herself, but still, the emotional difference between a 6th grader and a 9th grader is a lot.
Big difference.
And I think that with this 6th grade pod or a little island, it sounds like that you guys want to create, I don't understand how you said that it would give you a better chance to nurture the kids to be more attentive to them during the transition. And I don't understand why you wouldn't be able to do that now, and how this would make it easier or better to do that. And I don't want to. We could talk afterwards, or maybe to hear it, unless you want to. But I think that the biggest thing is that we need to have a more formalized plan. And is that what this is all going to lead to?
Correct.
Eventually?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think that's all I had to say.
Okay.
Oh, one other thing is that, with moving these children in the transportation, we live 3.5 miles from the elementary school. It takes an hour and 20 minutes to get home. And she's, so that's a 3.5 mile drive that takes 1.5 hours on a bus.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do when we're going, to other further away?
Right. It's a good question. That's a very real concern. In the back, Richard, Kathy, you next. Battery die.
It's green.
Oh, there it goes.
All right. Tim Barr with North Berwick. I see a 3-part problem, actually. 1, the restructuring issue, the overcrowding. 2, Paul's leaving. Now we have a superintendent. 3, and something I haven't heard mentioned yet, except briefly in the beginning, is the budget shortfall next year, which is $500,000 plus. So with those 3 things concerned, I understand that restructuring across town lines might not be the best solution, short-sighted, but I think whatever we decide to do, if that means turning everything upside down now for the long-term benefit, if that's what has to be done, that's what has to be done. If moving 6th or 8th grade is only a short-term solution, maybe we need to just kind of go in a different direction if we're going to be right back here in 2 or 3 years talking about the same thing. So just a thought I had, The budget shortfall concerns me, and if we can make something work that combines all three of those problems into one solution, then that's really where we need to focus, I think.
You said it. You're absolutely right. Yep. And down front for Kathy.
I think one of the things you should have done tonight was have a map of the high school so people could actually see
That's a really good idea.
the layout. Because a lot of people don't realize that there's different wings of the high school and there's different pods, which is what someone had mentioned. Each grade has different teams and they have different wings. And it would be, I assume it would be very easy to break the 6th grade into a separate wing of the high school, and it would actually be very easy to keep them separate. There's different wings for, I think there's like an alt team on the high school that doesn't utilize their space. And I have 2 high schoolers who have talked to me quite a bit about this, and they tell me that there's space at the high school to bring the 6th graders up. They can see that. I think the 6th grade going up would be the least offensive or the least traumatic for the kids because they do have that transition and they are going to transition to a different school going from 5th to 6th and then 6th to 7th, no matter where they go. 8th grade, I think, would be a really bad idea because the 7th and 8th grade kids are so hormonal. I have an 8th grade girl. I see all her friends. They talk about dating juniors and seniors in high school in the 8th grade already. If they're in the same building with them, who's going to stop them? The 8th grade going, I think, would be the hardest on the kids. I think the 6th grade would be the easiest, but you can see that there's different wings of the school, and I think the 6th grade could be kept very separate. The redistricting, I don't think would be that hard to do or that bad. It would be the short-term effects that would be really felt. I think, if you could phase it in, it might work, but to try and get the kids that are in there now, it would be really hard.
I think the phasing in is a really good point.
Well, 2 points. That is a floor plan that we showed at a different meeting when we talked about potentially the 8th grade at the high school. The building is in pods, so it is theoretically possible to isolate whatever grade level might come here. We did talk about transitioning if we go to that redistricting idea, because certainly, we have sympathy if you're a 4th grader and you've been at a school for 4 years. It's not a really easy answer because one of the things we couldn't quite do is to have a bus going down a street and taking some kids to Berwick and then some kids who live on that same street who are in a different grade to a different school. We'd have to run multiple buses down the same street. But maybe if it's an option and parents volunteer to transport or something like that, there might be some way to do it, but it's not as easy as it might first appear to do that.
I think then you get into the money issues as well. But it's an excellent point. Right in the back there, go right ahead.
This is exactly what I was coming up with and wondering about. If the 8th graders or the 6th graders are moved into the high school and they're in that pod there, is that 1 floor or is it the 2 floors? Have they figured out how that would be, and how would that affect, does it affect the professional development center? How does it affect the alternative ed program or the students who are currently there? Does it impact classroom sizes like the study mentioned? Just trying to get some clarity on that, please.
No. We basically would be able to keep the PDC and the alternative ed program. They might be in different spaces, but there was enough space to essentially house everything. We could even continue, if you know where the PDC is in the high school, there's actually 2 spaces for adult ed that we could keep as well. So it is doable without changing anything, and the only way class sizes go up for the high school staff is if we were to eliminate some high school staff. but that is not the intent, at least with this plan. So if you had the same number of staff, your class sizes would be the same. It's simply a case now that, you know, nature doesn't like a vacuum, and we just spread out to fill all the spaces that we have, because every single space here at the high school is used. It just doesn't necessarily need to be. So.
Next over.
Hello. Jay Randall. I live in North Berwick. The first thing I'd like to say is, with no disrespect to anybody here, the redistricting seems like the best idea, but we are a district, you know, and that we are expected at some point to all come together to go to, I guess now it's what, 6th grade and 7th, 8th, 9th, and so on. But it could be, like someone talked about earlier, grandfathered in, where some of the kids now would be able to go to the school up until they get out of that school and then go into the next level, and then kind of bring it in gradually. I think that's a good idea. With regards to the 6th grade school, and no disrespect to any of the 6th grade teachers here, again, it's like going from a Cadillac to a Yugo, right? So you're gonna go from a nice school and a nice facility back to, you know, where I went to high school, and but not to say that's a bad school, but you know, it's not as nice and the facilities aren't as pleasant. And I can understand why teachers would want to come here and teach. That would be a great opportunity to have this kind of facility. But no definite questions, but I just wanted to make some comments. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Up in the
having
corner
us.
right there.
Hi, my name is Erin Leip. I have kids. How old are you? I have a 5th grader who just came out of the Hussey School. I have a 7th grader who just moved up to the middle school. And I've got an infant toddling around somewhere. So it does affect him in the long term later. I guess I really appreciate whoever brought up moving Berwick 4th grade up to the Knowlton, if we're going to be dividing classrooms anyway, to give ourselves the time to really think it through and more long-term planning. You know, not to be personal, but this guy, we move the 6th grade up this year and then find that doesn't work. So 7th grade, he moves back down, and then 8th grade, he's back up here. Kind of puts him all over the place. I think regardless of whether you put 6th graders, 8th graders, 4th graders, anyone that's not in high school coming to a high school, there's going to be issues. There's going to be children. I guess you kind of hope that you've been a good parent, that you do teach your child not to date, you know, 8th graders dating juniors and everything like that. You watch them to the best that you can and hope. I think regardless, there's going to be that kind of issue. Looking at it from strictly academics, I think 8th graders can utilize the high school facilities better, especially when you're talking about 8th graders coming up to excel. But the other thing is I just asked him if he should be reading the books that his sister reads, and he said no. Just for content, as was mentioned before. No, you can't.
Okay. Thank you.
But anyway, so that was, you know, I think that giving ourselves the time and hopefully, you know, I understand it's going to make Knowlton really, really tight. I saw Hussey last year. It's really tight.
Yep.
But it seems like the least invasive for the short term.
Thank you. I'd like to give a moment for board members who have comments to pipe in. Anybody? Want a microphone? Slide it down. Yep.
I don't know if the lady's still here who had the concern, just for instance, about the school nurse. I think she's gone. I just wanted to let you know that, you know, just decisions like that is, you know, we are very sensitive to it. We do look at data and how many kids. I mean, I'm a school nurse in a neighboring town, and I was just picturing kindergartens and 18-year-olds in the same waiting room with was flashing before my eyes. So, you know, there are just some different things that are going to have to be, you know, worked out, you know, as far as that and guidance and all that. But I think, you know, there's a lot of us that work in education, we're parents, we're, you know, community members, so we will be looking at those types of things. And I think the other thing is when you look at sixth graders and high schoolers in the same building, you're looking at two age groups where they're probably one of the most emotional and crucial periods of growing up. So when we're looking at support services, those are the things we need to look at. So.
Nobody? Okay. Anybody else have anything to add? Derek, I know you had waited. Microphone. Run. Thank you. You guys have done a fabulous job. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure the board's well aware, and I just want to make sure I think everybody else realizes it. Again, it's really, you're addressing the short-term need for your elementary levels going through. And I think realistically, you have to take a two-step approach. How do we get through the immediate needs? And the immediate needs could be a transition of maybe up to 5 years to get through this. And I think the general public has to look at that, not just as a one-year deal. It could take 5 years to work this out. So any combination of those options, I think, are viable options. You just have to pick the right combination. But realistically, you'll have to reassess maybe 2 or 3 years and see how they work. Long term, I know there's no funds right now, but what are the actions going to be done to really look at how do we solicit funds, and they may not be available 5 years from now, to then really look at what are the long-term solutions to put in place. So I think the group as a whole, the district, has to realize the transition is really not 1 2 years, it's probably 5 years before you get the long-term goal to then really have some teeth to bite into.
Absolutely.
So.
You absolutely. Try that once. It's working. Yeah, it's off right now. Just switch up. Turns green, and I think it takes a second. Oh, still not.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there.
Okay. One of the challenges, and Peg spoke to it earlier, as a district, it's very difficult to foresee those things because we have 3 towns that are very different in how they handle things at the town level. And then we're kind of thrown all that stuff and said, okay, here, deal with it. So one of the things I think that the school board needs to do is reinforce to the towns the impact that they're having, and we try and do that, very much so, because we have one town in particular, my town, Berwick, that is growing because of actions that the town is taking, not necessarily because everybody wants to live in Berwick. So I think we need to include that in the discussion as well. Having a conversation, a real honest discussion with our Board of Selectmen saying, you need to do the things that support a steady, consistent, rational population growth. So I just wanted to add that to your piece.
Excellent. Margaret. Oh, good question. That's Margaret asked if there's going to be the before and after care at the Knowlton School if we move them up there, and that's certainly something that we would need to talk about. That's a really good point. Eric.
Yeah, my name's Eric Chalice. I'm a Berwick resident. I've lived in Berwick my whole life. I went to the school district, so I've been through everything here. But while in addition, I know we've kind of tabled this issue, but while an addition would be great, I would support it if the money was there. I'm a taxpayer in Berwick. I don't want to be paying for it. They're too high as they are. I think there are other options. Moving to 6th grade is a great option. 8th grade is a great option. I think everybody's come up with good options. But the one question I do have is what is being looked at in terms of budgets for the buses? You've got the Husky School and Lebanon. It's a constant flow of cars coming and going, bringing kids and picking them up. Is there something being done to reduce the amount of buses that are going back and forth so we're not paying to have empty buses transport 20 kids that can usually take 60 to 70 kids?
I don't know that we have buses that only have 16 kids on it, Eric. So,
Well, I don't know what the number is, but I'm just more concerned that we've got more parents bringing their kids.
Yes, can I speak to that? Eric, we have tried to deal with that. We've done some surveys, and I see Audra here tonight. We have surveyed parents to find out what that's about. The Vivian Hussey School is rather unique in the percentage of parents that drop their children off rather than riding the bus. We have tried to come up with offering them different solutions, and we've come up with nothing. It appears to be length of time on the bus, but we have done all kinds of things to try
Actually,
and reduce that.
it wasn't even that. Part of the survey was if the bus ride was shorter or cut in half,
Yeah.
would you have your child ride the bus? And the majority said no, that either for safety reasons or just for convenience to be able to get to karate after school or whatever, that it didn't matter how long or short the bus ride was, they were going to transport their kids. I think it's just the times that we're in.
That piece is one of the things that makes this whole issue more critical, because if you are in that parking lot in the morning or in the afternoon, it's insane. Somebody's going to get hurt, so we really do need to alleviate that rather quickly. Yep, up in the corner up there, go right ahead.
Hello, my name is Ann Stewart. I have a 5th grader at the Knowlton School. I am a North Berwick resident, and I don't want my 6th grader coming here next year. And Jackie's daughter is in 5th grade this year, and she'll be going there too. I mean, how do you feel about that? Have you really thought about it, Molly being up here?
I saw a lot of things, yes.
Yeah. But the other thing, I came in here.
My son as well that will be in 6th grade.
Yeah.
It's very emotional and personal.
It is, and you know, my kid's a big baby. I know my kid. I don't see him up here. He's got, well, Sam will be graduated hopefully, but James will be up here, and then William's coming up here, and I just can't see him coming up here. But the other thing also was, I wasn't here for the beginning of the meeting, and is there an option, because we're talking 7 months away before school starts again, is there an option of putting pods at the Hussey School for a temporary relief until we can come up with a plan? I just think that, I feel like this is such a huge emergency on everybody's part, and to have poor planning and have to rush to make a decision, I think that, is that an option?
Sure.
That does not address the traffic issue.
Right.
It continues to make it worse, because we're going to have at least 30 more kids there in the fall, and the ability to accommodate that much more traffic is just not there.
With the modular that's currently there, the cottage, as Audra calls it, we actually have space in the building to add another classroom. So in the short term for next year, as Peg said, it's really more about the traffic than the fact that we couldn't accommodate another classroom in the building. But certainly as the board looks at the budget, they could put in a module, whether it's for Hussey or for Knowlton, to ease the transition if they decide to move to 4th grade. So I think a modular is definitely something that could be talked about as we go forward with the budget.
Yeah, cafeteria too. Okay, well, thank you very much. This has been a wonderful conversation. We appreciate everybody who's come out tonight. And if you would then put your dots.
Vote early, vote often, and thank you so much. It's been a great conversation. We appreciate you coming out.
Oh, on Thursday? If I may, before you all step away, Thursday night's meeting will be at the Knowlton School for those of you who'd like to join us on Thursday night as well. Thank you. Stop by some time if you have a minute, so we can